For many years now, the Resident Evil series has been a franchise that I wanted to dive into, but I really felt like I was too late to the game. I've heard so many great things about the games, but it also felt like if I played them now, they might not live up to the hype in my head. They're a little outdated, controls and graphics wise, and since I don't have any nostalgia for them, they might not gain the same special place in my heart that so many other people have for them. There's of course the movies, and I've seen a few of them, or at least bits and pieces of a few of them, and I've heard that some of them are better than others, but the real Resident Evil experience is with the games. I'm probably not the only one who felt that way too, because Capcom decided that they were going to revamp these games for a new audience, and an audience that missed out on these experiences the first time around. So I've been playing through these remakes and absolutely loving my time in the first playthrough, the second playthrough, and now in my third playthrough I'm still loving my experience, and that doesn't happen too often. There's been 4 remakes so far. There's the first Resident Evil game, which was remade in 2002, so it's still pretty outdated. And then there's Resident Evil 2, 3, and 4, which started in 2019 with Resident Evil 2 and into this year with Resident Evil 4. So if you're a fan of these games, or if you've never played them, I'm going to be talking about my experiences, what I liked, what I didn't really care for, and some highlights from my playthroughs. So if you want to hear a first-time player's thoughts, then keep on watching through. So grab your healing spray, spend $5 in order to unlock the unlimited ammo weapons, and save your game at a typewriter of all things, and let's talk about the world and story of Resident Evil. So I feel like I should reiterate that I knew absolutely nothing about this franchise. I had seen some gameplay of older games, I had maybe watched 1 or 2 movies on TV, and that was it. So going into Resident Evil 2, my understanding was that Resident Evil was an action game series with some horror elements thrown in there, similar to the films, but from the very beginning portion of the game, walking through the gas station, I knew that I had it completely backwards. This was a survival horror game with some action elements thrown in there, and I couldn't be happier about that. The zombies are absolutely terrifying in this game. You think you killed one, and then you walk by it, and it grabs you and bites you in the leg. The zombies themselves aren't the only scary thing, but I'll get to that in a little bit. I cover a lot of zombies content on this channel: The Walking Dead, Call of Duty Zombies, The Last of Us. Maybe some people will get angry I'm calling them zombies for The Last of Us, but they are essentially zombies. So I've been a bit desensitized to zombies over the years because of how much media I consume around that genre, but Resident Evil 2 felt like a breath of fresh air for me personally, because it went back to the roots of zombies, and that's full-blown horror. In this game, you play as both Leon Kennedy and Claire Redfield. Leon is a rookie at the RPD, and Claire is a civilian. And boy, does this game really make you feel that way. You don't feel like a superhero, you can't get hit too many times or else you're dead, you can't dodge or stand in a fight because you have so little ammo, so your best bet is to run away like 95% of the time. This game absolutely kicked my ass, so much that when I was playing on the standard difficulty, the game was like, are you sure you don't want to play on easy? I was running out of ammo constantly, I was holding my side as I ran constantly, so yes, alright, I switched to easy difficulty. I thought I was good at video games, but I'm not. Also, this footage is from my second playthrough of the game, so no, I did not use the infinite ammo guns on my first run. I just wanted an easier time to record footage and also look like Rick Grimes in this sheriff uniform. Leon and Claire both have their own separate stories, even though they go through the same areas, but that's where one of the highlights of the game comes in, and that's the level design. While both campaigns share the same locations, they act entirely different based on different locked doors and items that you need to progress earlier or later on in each respective campaign. This type of design allows you to explore the areas differently, look for different clues and items, but going about it in a unique way. It does require a lot of backtracking, which some people aren't a fan of, and I'm usually not, but exploring these areas never really felt like a task to me. I could just take a different route or stop somewhere else that I needed to stop anyways to get something else on my way towards the objective. This game doesn't really hold your hand when it comes to puzzles, which I especially love. Sometimes I was stuck and unsure of what to do or where to go, but with more time exploring, I was able to figure it out, and I liked that there wasn't any check marks or indicators on where to go or how to solve the puzzles. You have to find the locker combinations, write stuff down to remember codes and ciphers, and this adds an element to the game that's challenging, but also fun because of how rewarding the puzzles are. On my first playthrough, I didn't even get one of the guns that Leon has because I just didn't know how to figure out the puzzle. So some of these puzzles made me feel like I'm the dumbest person in the world. I sat at this chess puzzle for the longest time because I could not figure out why the order of the pieces wasn't working, and I found out it was because I thought the king was the queen and the queen was the king. I was really surprised that this game really only had 3 different settings: the RPD, the sewers, and the underground lab. I'm not really sure what I was expecting, a sprawling action game set across the city or going from place to place in each new level like The Last of Us, but this game feels entirely different than any other game I've ever played. It's also very moment to moment. When a cutscene happens, you don't skip ahead in time, you're right where it ended and walking to the next objective. I played Leon's story first and then Claire's, and the storylines of both games kinda confused me. Whoever you play as second gets notes from the other person saying that they've already been there and have subsequently left, but all the puzzles are still there for you to do. You go through the same areas, meet some of the same people, and the timeline gets really confusing. They also barely interact with each other throughout the course of the game. They're together at the start, they meet and flirt outside the gates instead of trying to find a way in with those bolt cutters in your inventory, and then again at the end, but their stories are largely separate from each other. As Leon, you make your way through the RPD and eventually meet Ada Wong, a member of the FBI on her own mission, and you get wrapped up with her. Eventually going underground, where you learn more about the origin of the T-virus and trying to stop it from spreading even further. Leon and Ada have this sort of flirty, backstabby relationship, one that I wasn't too convinced of, but I think for Leon's character, being a rookie and wanting to save everybody and trust everybody and do the right thing, it made sense for his character. As Claire, you once again make your way through the RPD and run into this little girl, Sherry, who happens to be the daughter of Annette and William Birkin. Well, Annette is a terrible mother and William is a monster, so Claire takes it upon herself to go and save this girl, getting out of the city just in time for Leon to catch up with them. I think out of the two, I enjoyed Claire's story more. I think it was the more emotional of the two, but it also might have been due to the fact that it was my second playthrough and I felt more comfortable and confident making my way through the game on my easy difficulty. But I also liked her weapons more out of the two of them, so that also played a big factor. But regardless of who you play as the first time around, the game hints at a different ending if you play through the other person's story, which is a really great incentive to give the other person's story a shot, because otherwise the story kind of just ends. Like I said, I played as Leon the first time around, and when I got on the train to finally see Claire and continue the story with her, she was with this random little girl, and then the story ended.
What's this?
So of course I wanted to see who this girl was and what Claire's story was, and also to see the actual ending of the game. So I think that's about everything. Oh my god, this guy again. I cannot explain to you the pure fear that goes through my mind as soon as this guy, Mr. X, pops up. I think in my first playthrough, about 50% of my ammo went to trying to kill this guy, only for him to keep on coming back. Even on additional runs of the game, this guy still makes me shrivel up inside. It's like a scarier looking Terminator coming after you, and I truly cannot give you another time where I have felt this terrified while playing a game. Well, I can think of one, but that's later on. So I've been singing this game's praises, but there are some things that I don't like. Like I said before, the stories and how they combine together doesn't really make that much sense. In one playthrough, Mr. X is killed fairly early on, and in the other, he's the final boss fight. Was there actually two Mr. X's? No, that's a scary thought. Let's move on. The blue herb, absolutely pointless. I think I needed to use this one time across both of my playthroughs, and I kept waiting on when I was gonna need it, and I just never really did. Especially in this game when the red and green herbs are your lifeline, whenever I found a blue one, I just would most of the time leave it on the ground because I already had 5 others in my inventory, and that's where they stayed the entire game. The knife was super annoying. Half the time I'd just forget it or be so surrounded that I couldn't grab it again, and then it'd be gone forever. Also, just the fact that they break in general, I get that you can pick up more of them, it's a gameplay mechanic, but out of all the tedious gameplay mechanics in this game, the knife was really the only one that really bothered me. I'm never really one to complain about frame rates or graphical issues, they don't really bother me too much, but it did happen a lot while I was playing this game, so I guess here I am complaining about them. Then again, it's probably because I'm playing on the Series S. One last thing I really loved, there's typewriters as save game points. As soon as I saw that, I knew that this was some kind of message from the gaming gods that I was in the right place with this series, and that I was. Overall, I'd give this game a solid 9 out of 10. Also, why are there so many of these goddamn fire hydrant things everywhere? I was sure that they were going to be used for something. Am I missing something? Because they didn't do anything. Why are there so many? Fresh off of finishing RE2, I went over to RE3, expecting the same level of challenge and difficulty, so I went ahead and dropped the difficulty down to easy, though I eventually realized I did not need to play this game on easy. No ammo is no problem in this game. I had so much ammo that it took up like 90% of my inventory, and it kept on dropping, so I was never left running around, clutching my side and avoiding the zombies. I'd go full on attack mode, stand my ground, and kill every single zombie that I could find, and still have a ton of ammo left over. Resident Evil 3 introduces us to 2 new playable characters. There's Jill Valentine and Carlos Oliveira, and these two, let's just say, they are not rookies or civilians. Jill is actually a returning playable character from the original Resident Evil game. She's a member of the STARS team located in Raccoon City. Jill and Carlos are both pretty great characters. They're a little simple, but they have a nice back and forth between them, and their stories intertwine in a more cohesive and understandable way than Leon's and Claire's did in RE2, so I really liked that. The story of this game is actually pretty similar to RE2. Jill and Carlos are working together to escape the city and stop the virus from spreading any further, though this time there's a cure and they're trying to stop the military from bombing the city. Along the way, they're being chased by an experiment let loose from Umbrella, and that's Nemesis. Jill and Carlos, like I said, they're not rookies. Jill has an ability to dodge, which is a really great addition, and Carlos has this kind of like counter punch ability, so they both play at least ever so slightly differently, and that was a really great addition. Because they aren't rookies or civilians, they actually do feel a lot like superheroes. They go through crazy stunt sequences, have a lot more ammo and fighting abilities, so this, in essence, does make it feel a lot less scary. It feels like they took Mr. X from the first game, saw how terrifying he was, and made a whole game based around that concept, because Nemesis really feels like a more intense version of Mr. X, but also a slightly less scary version. Because you have the means to deal with him most of the time, aka a lot of ammo, he doesn't feel as terrifying. Now, there are still moments of fear in this game, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't touch the atmosphere or feeling that RE2 had. But they do actually feel like very similar games in terms of overall feeling. There's the same inventory system, controls, camera, and I really like how these felt. These are remakes, so mostly all the kinks have been worked out and they just kept the mechanics that work, so the overlap of how they feel, despite being different games, remains the same. Now, this game takes place on the same night as Resident Evil 2, just a little bit before, and also in different locations. So we're getting to see parts of the city and what's going on elsewhere around the time that Leon is probably at the gas station with Claire and driving into the city. So to see a different point of view of Raccoon City other than Claire and Leon's was another aspect of the game that I really enjoyed. Probably my favorite thing about this game is the overlap in locations from Resident Evil 2. We see Carlos travel to the RPD before Leon and Claire get there, so some of the level design is different, and we get to see how the pipes burst and how the wall opens up, and that was really great to see. We also get to see stuff like how Marvin gets bit, and it makes these games feel connected in more ways than just the gameplay. One of the details I really liked was how the locker combinations were the same as they were in RE2, so I remembered a few of them and could just open them right up. If they were different, I'd understand, but it would also be disappointing. These small details really add up and make this world feel that much more realistic, and honestly for me, more memorable. Jill also travels just outside the RPD and runs into the same man that Leon and Ada would run into later that night. And while these are small things, they stand out to me and make me more invested in this story and this universe. They also got rid of the blue herb, which was fantastic because I didn't have any space for it with all of my extra ammo. The Russian villain is a little bland. His motivation is to get more money, so that was a bit plain, but it still works. This game was really short. It took me around 12 or 13 hours to beat RE2 on my first playthrough, and it took me about 4 hours to beat this one. And that was with me going around looking for items and solving all the puzzles, and that really surprised me. I'm not sure if this was a full-priced game at launch, but if it was, I'd be pretty pissed. There also wasn't really any incentive to go back through and play the story again after you beat it like RE2 had. There's no different ending, there's barely any costumes, so if anything this game almost felt like a DLC for Resident Evil 2. No wonder why they felt so similar. Apparently there was a lot of cut content from the original game, and that makes sense. If I were a hardcore Resident Evil fan, I'd be pretty upset. But I never played the original version, so I still really enjoyed my playthrough of this game. Even my second playthrough was great to get everything that I didn't get from the first time, and also for this footage, but it's definitely not as great as Resident Evil 2. It's a 7.5 from me. Now, time for the big one. This is really the game that I associate with the Resident Evil franchise, even before I had ever even played it. I had always heard the greatest things about Resident Evil 4. It's one of the best games ever made. It's the best survival horror game. It's everything that's great about Resident Evil. It's peak everything that you could possibly hear. I've heard it before I ever even bought it. So I waited a little bit between playing Resident Evil 2 and 3 and this one. I wanted to try and play it on its own and not constantly compare it to the other remakes because I was really worried that all this hype surrounding it, all the 10s, all the reviews would lead me to expect something more than I would get. So were my worries warranted?
Absolutely fucking not.
So in Resident Evil 4, Leon is tasked with rescuing the president's daughter from a recluse location in Spain. It becomes all about the rescue, multiple times, add in some Harry Potter, some Jurassic Park, some 80s action movie, and that's the story of Resident Evil 4. This game takes both aspects of the other remakes, the horror elements of RE2 and the action elements of RE3, and blends them together in a perfect mix. You have ammo and you're a more trained soldier, but you're also stranded and overwhelmed a lot of the time in this terrifying atmosphere, wherever that might be over the course of the game. This gameplay actually is from my first playthrough, so if it looks like I have no idea what I'm doing, it's because I don't. This game starts you off in a village. You make your way around it and eventually up towards the mountain in the castle, then the underground depths of the castle, and then towards some ruins that are being excavated. And all of these locations feel unique from each other and also massive in comparison to the maps of the other two remakes. I think that Leon is a much better character this time around. Not that there was anything really wrong with him in RE2, but he's just much more experienced and jaded this time around, not as trusting and just smarter. It's easy to see why he became such an iconic character in this franchise after playing this game. The level design is once again amazing, and it's at its best here. There's some added verticality in some areas and also further sight lanes that allow for weapons like rifles to actually be used here. And pairing this level design with the atmosphere and the locations that this game brings you through is honestly incredible to play through. It's funny because looking at this game, the location and some of the story elements, it feels like a big departure from the series. It's not Raccoon City, that's for sure, so in some ways, if you looked at this game on paper, setting the story in such a place could be seen as a big departure that may not work, but steps like this are needed in order to grow a franchise, and Resident Evil 4 did exactly that. This game took risks like adding in a store and money system, as well as some more magical elements that weren't present in the other games. It's weird because it feels like this was always where the true heart and soul of Resident Evil was, but it was also completely different than the games that came before it. There are so many different quality of life changes that really make this game stand head and shoulders above the rest. The Typewriter now being the place to change weapons as well as just change your different case is a great change. Auto sort is an extremely welcome addition, just like there being separate inventories for keys and quest items than your weapons and resources. These are small changes, but they really do make all the difference in the world. The controls of this game are also better than the controls of the other remakes. Being able to block attacks, crouch down, throw grenades from the D-pad, I get that all games kind of want to stand out with their own control scheme, but this is more comfortable and recognizable to other third-person shooter games, and it's comfortable for a reason. If it's not broken, don't fix it. This really does feel like it's the most polished game of the franchise, and not just because it's the newest. This was actually one of my worries for this game because I wasn't too sure how they could improve the aspects of the other games, but after playing this one, it's been hard to go back to the other ones. The knife, while it can break, you can fix it and have it on you at all times, and it's actually useful for killing enemies and blocking attacks. I mean, this thing can block a goddamn chainsaw, so you know it must be pretty good. So I don't know if it's just that I'm getting used to the Resident Evil formula, or if they were just easier in this game, but I never really ran into problems solving puzzles. They were just as great as the puzzles from the other games, maybe a bit less relevant than puzzles were in RE2, but I never really felt dumb or incompetent because I could always solve them within a matter of seconds or minutes. There are so many different kinds of enemies in this game, it's insane. There's of course one of the big Terminator guys, you can't go without adding in one of them. There's these insane villagers that aren't actually zombies, which took me some time to realize, but these enemies aren't zombies at all. I mean, I guess they kind of are, but they're also really not. Anyways, there's these regenerating douchebags and flying bugs, so many, and also this one boss fight that literally made me more scared than Mr. X did, and that's this alien-looking thing, the Verdugo. This thing, I literally had to pause the game and compose myself because it was literally that terrifying. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure if this is a common occurrence or if it's just me. I don't know why this one affected me so much, but it did, and I'm really not looking forward to the section on any of my subsequent playthroughs. Speaking of boss fights, I didn't really find them to be all that challenging. I guess none of the boss fights in these games are all that challenging, but I noticed it a lot in this game. You have these larger-than-life creatures coming at you, and you kind of take them down with your knife and a few bullets. Now, I'm not complaining, I'm not calling them lackluster, I also played this game on easy difficulty, so maybe I should just shut my mouth, but they were definitely easier than I expected them to be. I also ran into some frame rate and resolution issues, and like I said, I'm not one to complain usually, but when it interferes with a puzzle I'm trying to solve, it does get annoying. There's a lot of backtracking quests in this game, same as the others, but I definitely noticed it more in this one. That's probably due to the scale of this game being much larger than the previous ones, but there was a time that I was looking for a key to a church, and I found myself in a cave looking for these severed stone heads, and I just kind of had to remind myself, like, what am I actually doing right now? What am I looking for? One of the things that really confused me was this guy, Major Krauser, who was apparently the guy who trained Leon, and they had all this history, but I had never seen him or heard of him before. I suppose he's this guy in this like flashback training montage Leon voiceover, but I didn't recognize him at all. Now, I've only played the remakes, so I thought that maybe I had missed something, but when I looked it up, it said that this was his first appearance in a Resident Evil game, so that just felt really odd to me. Apparently they came out with another game about the mission that they went on and the history that happened there, but it came out after RE4. Now, here's where I know I'm gonna lose a lot of people. I really didn't like Ashley.
You what?
Not really so much as a character. In fact, I think that the banter between her and Leon when they're together is pretty great, and they have a great and actually fleshed out relationship, but having her as a companion really sucked. So much of this game is rescuing Ashley, getting her, having her be in the way during the fight sequences just for her to ultimately get captured, so that way you have to rescue her again. I did not like having her as a companion. She helped out with like a few puzzles here and there. I actually did really enjoy the section where you play as her, but the times that she was captured or away from Leon, I felt were the more enjoyable aspects in the game. I know Ashley has her own fan base of people, but I am not part of that fan base. But even with some of these issues that I have, the overall product of this game is incredible. The story, the characters, the gameplay, it's all super ambitious in terms of what we've got from this franchise, and it pays off because it is easily the best game out of these remakes, and I wasn't sure that it could get any better than RE2. It's a 10, we all know it's a 10, my worries, thankfully, were not warranted. So what are my overall thoughts on this franchise so far? I am loving every single second of it. I mean what I said in the title, I am now completely obsessed with the series and I need more. I truly haven't felt this way in a long time about any franchise, so to be at the start of getting ready to devour a new one is pretty cool. These games are all very unique and very special among the games that I've played before. There are moments that it reminds me of the Arkham games, Gears of War, The Last of Us, but Resident Evil stands on its own. And now that I can see a bit of the history of these games, I don't think that any of the games that I mentioned would be here without Resident Evil's influence. It took me a bit of time to see this franchise for what it is, or at least what I think it is. I talked about how a lot of the characters are pretty one-dimensional, saying campy one-liners and having really generic villains, but I think that's part of the charm. The villains all want things like power and money, and the characters don't really have any internal conflicts of their own, at least for the most part, yet they're still incredibly likable and enjoyable to play as. Is it just because we're projecting ourselves onto these characters? No, I really don't think so. These characters are here to serve as guides for the world that Capcom created, a world that is at all times frightening, action-packed, and downright confusing at times, and that was done on purpose. These characters are easy to attach to because of the situations we're seeing them go through, and because we want to root for them to succeed. Resident Evil really breaks down storytelling to its simplest components when it comes to the characters. They have their own goals, whether that be for good or evil. They can be conflicted or confused, but it's all very simple. I'm usually not one to enjoy stories with very simple characters like that, but there's something about Resident Evil that makes it stand out and not feel so generic. I also think this is part of the problem as to why the adaptations for the movies have failed. These are great video game stories, but they aren't really adaptable to screen. I'm very happy that I decided to play these games and to start with Resident Evil 2, because I do think that that's the hardest game of the three so far. If I had played 3 or 4 first and then went back to 2, I'm not even sure if I could finish it. The third game certainly has the most 80s movie crazy action sequences and set pieces, and the fourth game has the perfect formula of both. I've been doing my own research on the 5th game and beyond, and I heard that these entries aren't as well liked by the fans, so I hope if and when they do remake the subsequent games, they can remake them not only for my own enjoyment, but enhance them so that way they can be on par with Resident Evil 2 and 4's remake. I'd even take another game like Resident Evil 3 if I'm being honest, but I'd certainly like it to be on par with 2 and 4. These games have the formula for survival, horror gameplay, and puzzle solving to a T. Even with it being modernized and similar in feel with a lot of the other third-person shooters, Resident Evil stands out. So I guess that means it's time for the next... Wait a minute, there's no more remakes? What do I do now? Do I just keep replaying them and wait for the next one now? No, that's a serious question. Really, what should I do now? Should I skip and go right to 7, wait for the RE5 remake or the Code Veronica remake? See, I know the games now. Go back and play the old ones, play Resident Evil 5 from 2009. For all you Resident Evil fans watching, my fate is in your hands. Tell me what to do next. If you want to see any other Resident Evil videos, like a story explained video or anything like that, please let me know that. I would love to keep on making videos like this if this video does well. And if you enjoyed the video, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. If you do, then I'll see you in the next one.
Yeah.